You're pointing at me, Brian. Is it my cue or is it you?
I'm cueing you.
You're cueing me? Welcome. We are on episode 6 today. Hey, everyone. Living the New Life Part 2. It's been a long time coming.
One of the things that we're going to cover in today's episode, the new life and how we choose to do it.
If you guys recall, we kind of left you hanging back in episode 4. We mentioned we were taking separate trips. Remember that?
And it was fun. It was great. I had an amazing ice fishing trip, Shannon.
Oh, yeah. I loved my trip to Arizona.
But now we also, as we came back together, we had a kid-free weekend to do a trip of our own, just us.
Together. That was so nice. Thanks, Brian, for that opener. You ready?
You ready? Hi, folks, and welcome to the Fruitful Ever After podcast with Brian and Shannon. Newlyweds, but not new to marriage. We are exposing our journey to living fruitful ever after and why it matters to you.
We both know the pains of divorce and come together with wisdom and embrace our second chance at doing life and relationship God's way. We are a husband and wife duo on a mission to serve the Lord.
In these episodes, you'll hear stories, receive life skills, perspective, and biblical commentary to enhance your personal and relational growth.
Whether you are single or dating, married or divorced, forget your happily ever after and join us on this journey to find wholeness and fulfillment.
Welcome to our show. Hey folks, welcome to Fruitful Ever After, episode number 6, Living the New Life, part 2. Shannon, can you give us a little recap on part number 1?
Part 1 was found in episode 4. If you want to go back and listen in on what the past entailed, we talked about roadmaps and how it led to us starting to live a new way, a new life. And these roadmaps are important. When we share our stories, it gives others hope. It gives others a chance to kind of follow along so that if they're struggling with similar issues and challenges, that they can find a way out also.
And though we're not saying that our blueprint or our roadmap is superior to anyone else's, what we do feel is that we honor God in this roadmap. And I think that's how we feel what separated us from societal norms of the dating period. So that's who we're hoping to reach, is the people that may be lost, that may not have a way or not have a roadmap, that we can maybe give you some basics in this episode of what the new life can potentially look like.
Right, because Brian and I took 2 different paths when we were healing post-divorce. God ultimately led us together. God, in your story too, will change you, turn you, make whatever it is that's happening into something beautiful. But the key is just turning towards Him and accepting His plan for your life. And that's the hard part, the surrender piece. So let's dive into that a little more, because now that Brian and I are together, we've been married almost 7 months. It's been a wonderful time being married, but we got to continually live in this new way. It's not like we got to this destination, we're married, and now boom, like things are fine. It's still work, it's still effort. We have to live this new way with God as our guide. And so we're going to discuss that. What are we doing now in our present to stay living this new course, this new life, as we now have a marriage and a blended family, and what we hope our future is going to look like? We can't tell the future because only God knows our story. He's writing it, but we do trust that if we stay His path, His course, that it'll be made for good things. You'll catch 3 main points in this podcast today. 1 is inadequacies and how to gracefully approach that. 2 is the importance of pursuing friendship and relationship with your significant other, and more importantly, with God. And 3 is holding on to hope for the future.
So we're not going to go back into episode number 4. We covered that as far as what our past was. But what makes our new path, what makes this marriage different than what we have experienced in the past? Can you give us a couple examples, Shannon, what we've done differently in our own stories now compared to our past?
Absolutely. We ended up kind of leaving off on this point that I wanted to bring up first, is about inadequacies. And how you and I have looked at inadequacies is way different. And I feel this is a way healthier approach. So for all of you listening, if you kind of think and reflect, like, who is your inner voice? Who are you listening to? And when you're feeling down on yourself or discouraged, who put that voice in your head? Like, who's telling you that you're a failure? Who's telling you you're a letdown? There's a quote and it goes something like this. It was shared in episode 4 too, but Satan knows your name, but calls you out by your sin and shortcomings and inadequacies. God knows all that about you, but still chooses to call you by name. Unfortunately, all too often, we listen to the voice that isn't of God.
So that's a very, very deep philosophical approach to this. But what I pull out of it and what I want our listeners to pull out of it is when we look at our inadequacies, are they from outside sources? Are people pointing out our inadequacies? And then do we internalize it? We may hear our inadequacies from other people, but we are our own worst critics. So there's two major flaws in that. Number one, we're relying on outside sources to give us our value, and then we look inward to see our value, and that's all wrong. There's only one person that truly values us, and that's who we should look at, and that is Jesus Christ. I can't make this clear enough. I want to make this abundantly clear. When you're feeling those inadequacies, because we still feel it from time to time being married, we look to our spouse to help lift us up. That is important, without any question. We look internally to see what we can change. That is important, but it is not the most important thing. The most important thing is the value that we get is given to us by God. And I want people to truly understand that, because that's unwavering. That's grace. It's freely given. That's never going to go away.
Your passion behind this, Brian, is so inspiring. I'm so glad you're wording it that way. It really does make a difference when we know why love exists, why forgiveness exists. It's all because God created it. He is love. And when we look at others through that lens of Christ, we can see others that way too. And though your spouse is built to be that confidant, that person to build you up, to show you Christ-like love, that person's going to fail from time to time. So ultimately, it's falling back on God's word, falling back on his truth in the Bible.
100%. This weekend, I had an opportunity to go to a Wells conference, Men of His Word. One of the things that stuck out to me was this. Because we were made in the image of God, we will always strive for perfection. And sometimes we look for that perfection in someone else, in whoever we're dating, whoever we're married to. That's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. We're going to let each other down. If you're expecting to find that perfect person, it's not going to happen. You need to accept who you're with, if God put them in your life, and understand that they are going to have flaws, they are going to have inadequacies, and how you approach that is going to be the key to success. And that'll point us back to Colossians 3, verse 12. There's some very good key points in that verse.
Very true.
I'm going to read it to you now. Since God chose you to be the holy people he loves, you must clothe yourselves with tenderhearted mercy, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience.
I think we're opening the door to some examples. So I'll start, Brian. Okay. Lately, we've had this conversation a couple times now. Ladies, you know what I'm talking about. Okay. We do look different when we wear makeup compared to when we don't. Okay. There's no denying that. And I tell you, this man right here, Brian, I give him so much credit. He looks at me the same. I'll look at myself in the mirror from time to time and I'm like, did not realize I didn't put on makeup today. I'm so sorry. And he's like, what do you mean? And he looks at me the same. But to me, that's an inadequacy. And you do not point that out ever.
So if I can dovetail off that, do I notice when you wear makeup? 100%. Do I notice when you don't wear makeup? 100%. But that doesn't change who you are. And our connection that we made emotionally and spiritually is what drives the success of who we are as a couple, who we are as a married couple. And thank you for pointing that out. Now I'm going to point one out. So this was last week, and this was looking inward at an inadequacy. I was talking to Shannon about some parenting advice, and I don't think she was asking for advice. And after we got done with our conversation, I thought to myself, she wasn't asking for advice. I probably shouldn't have given that. So I apologize for that. But what Shannon ended with was pointing out something that was supposed to be nurturing for kids, but how I took it was, did she just call me lazy? And that's what was ruminating on my brain. I had this whole long text typed out. And I thought, that's not who she is as a person. And this goes back to like what you're talking about with makeup. I know who you are as a person with or without it. So I know that's not what you meant by it, but it was still ruminating in my brain because of my own inadequacies and my own past, and someone from the outside always saying that I'm lazy. So instead, I just asked Shannon if she had a minute to chat. So she picked up the phone between one of her patients and we talked about it. And lo and behold, guess what? It had nothing to do with that whatsoever. What Shannon was pointing out was that everybody needs nurturing from time to time, even us. What we need to count on is looking at it through the lens of Jesus. And again, pointing back to Colossians 3:12. So the commitment that we made to each other and our vows, the word that sticks out was gentleness.
When it comes down to consistency, Brian, you know how I consistently communicate, and that's in terms of it's never pointing out your inadequacies. Being consistent in our relationship, we've kind of made that promise to each other where we're not going to be each other's worst advocate. We're going to build each other up. If there's ever a time where I notice you are feeling down about yourself or I'm feeling down about myself, or we screw up or make a mistake in something, like, oh, you're not going to call me out for it.
Can I give an example? So Shannon and I, we had a project at the house here that we were putting new stair treads and risers on. And one of the parts of the project was staining the stairs themselves, the stair treads, in a dark cherry. And Shannon accidentally dropped some of the stain.
Oh my gosh, yeah, all over the garage.
And the look of fear on her face wasn't from my reaction. I didn't have a reaction, but it was unfortunately years of, how would I put it?
Well, I was conditioned to be afraid whenever a mistake was made, for real. And so now here I'm in this new marriage and I'm like, not sure how to react because it's my first time ever really like making a huge permanent mistake here. I just stained your garage floor in a cherry color.
And it looks great. And this is not me jumping up on a pedestal because we're not about that. We don't want to be boastful. But my reaction to her was this. And I just shrugged my shoulders like, what? It was a mistake. I said, now, given the context of the mistake, if you went inside the house and started throwing stain all over the walls with a paintbrush, I'd probably say, Shannon, what are you doing?
We have a problem.
But no, it was a mistake. And we're going to go through life having mistakes like that.
The look of peace in your eyes, Brian, just gave me such relief. I felt like immediately happy tears just started flowing down. Actually, they were more like confused tears. I didn't know if I should be sad, scared, happy, but ultimately inside I felt forgiven. You had this posture of kindness and forgiveness, and your words and eyes said, it's okay, accidents happen.
Mistakes are always going to happen. They're going to happen daily. We make mistakes daily. And it's how you approach your spouse with that mistake ultimately is what's going to, number one, build the trust, build the confidence, and start to beat down on those inadequacies that you felt maybe from a previous spouse, maybe from a partner or even
a parent.
Older sister. Just kidding. Kelly, I know you're not listening to this, but I love you.
So in the big picture, I like the examples and I like how we're pointing people in this direction because I think too often we don't realize how negative we can be on other people because we have expectations for one another that others aren't meeting because you think that you can complete the task better than the other person, or it's supposed to be completed a certain way because of aesthetics or because of style or because of personal preference. But we all are different people and we each have a different preference. So people listening, how many times are you guys irritated by the way someone loads the dishwasher or puts dishes away or folds laundry? Everyone does it differently. And if we go in after your significant other or your child or whoever's helping you, your roommate, does a task and you go and undo it and redo it, oh man, what message is that sending to that person? It says, you're not good enough. I know better. And that's a slap in the face.
Absolutely. And now there's a fine line between accountability and being critical. It's important to hold people accountable. When we take the laundry out, and I fold it a different way than Shannon does, she doesn't say anything about it. It's just the way that I do laundry. She doesn't give me grief about it. When I load the dishwasher, there's no specific way to do it. It's a task that needed to get done. And that is as simple and as insignificant as that may seem, like that we're talking about it, when you are conditioned years and years and years of not folding towels the right way, not wiping down the counters good enough, not clean or putting away a plate that has a speck of food on it that you missed. You didn't do it on purpose. When you're conditioned to that for years and years and years, when you finally get into a relationship with a spouse that completely fully understands that we're human, we're going to make mistakes, that is a huge blessing. We owe all the glory to God for that. There was a pivotal moment in my life where I was one of those people who was critical because of
Critical on others.
correct. And here's the example that I want to give. So my best friend, Mitch, I know your wife, Tracy, listens. And if I never told you, to your face, I apologize. I apologize now. I was working at Tires Plus. I just picked up a big cruiser, and you told me you bought a motorcycle. So you wanted to bring it by my work because you were proud of it. And you pull up, and I look at it, and I look at you. It was a Sportster 883. And my first comment was, I thought you were buying a motorcycle, not a girl's bike. And the look of defeat that I saw on his face, I instantly regretted what I said. So the key to that, or I guess the lesson that I learned, is this is my best friend since kindergarten. He is so happy and so proud of the purchase that he just made. And all I did was drag him down and make him feel bad about it. And he just shrugged it off because that's the type of person that he is. Like, oh, you probably didn't mean it. But in my heart, I hurt because of what I just said to him. Thank you for letting me tell that story. So, Mitch, I love you, brother. And I apologize if I ever made you feel bad about that. And Tracy, if you're listening, give him a hug for me.
I appreciate your courage sharing that story too, Brian, because all too often we have some pride in our hearts and we don't like to admit when we've done wrong. And I think if we look at it with a different scope, we can take those moments like you just described and use that as a moment to just stop and pivot and use it, say, I'm not going down that road again. I don't want to treat people that way. And now you've got this new life that you're living, because I've never experienced that. You've never cut me down. You've never used sarcasm at me to tease me. I know that everything that's coming out of your mouth is truthful and honest, and you're consistent with how you build me up. So when we do have those disagreements or those times where I don't fully understand, if I interpret it the wrong way, I can seriously hit the pause button, allow my emotional reaction to pass, which truly I think science says it takes about 90 seconds. If you just sit in your emotion, 90 seconds, those hormones that are released after you have an emotional reaction will pass. So allow the emotion to pass without overthinking it. And then you can think with clarity and say, hey, you know what? I know this person. He's shown me consistency in how he respects me and how he's treated me gently. I'm sure I just misunderstood. I better call him up and ask, or sit him down and ask.
And it's so easy to talk about it because we model that. But what I see has gained popularity over the last, 5 or 10 years on Facebook Reels, on TikTok. I think it's called the Blonde Brewer, if someone looks it up. But it's always either the husband or the wife, like, just making fun of the other person. And unfortunately, we all think that's funny. And I've been guilty of thinking that it's funny and giving it a thumbs up. But if we try to model our lives after that, it's going to lead to just bad stuff. It's going to lead to arguments and then resentment. And then when that resentment builds, ultimately, broken hearts happen. And what we're telling you isn't fiction. What we're telling you is how we choose to live our lives. And I'm hoping that whoever's listening either has an aha moment or can reflect, not inward, maybe inward first, but then put it on God, to be able to say, holy buckets, you know what? That's how I've been living my life. And it may be cutting the other person down. So that's one of those lessons in this episode that I hope people can take away, is treating each other with gentleness and kindness, knowing that you're with a flawed human being, because we're flawed as well.
Right. What do you say, Brian, to the people who are just really, really excessively playful, I'll say, and they love to be humorous, and maybe it kind of crosses the line. How do you know if you're one of those people that's crossing the line from being just normal playful? Because you and I are playful people, but what does it look like when you're crossing the line?
So it goes back to, I forgot what episode it was when we talked about unconditional respect. So what I find humorous is jump scares. I've used to find that very humorous. But Shannon has told me, please don't do that to me because I don't like being scared. And because I have this respect for her, even before we were married, I choose not to do that. That's not to say that I haven't scared her on purpose, but I don't jump out and scream. One case in point, when we were at her house, I was hiding behind the bathroom door. When she came in, I didn't say anything. I didn't look at her. I didn't jump at her. It startled her.
Oh my gosh.
But it was funny, but I didn't go out of my way to jump scare you. But because I know that about you, because you respectfully told me, please don't do that, then I don't do that.
That is a good point. I think having that communication with each other and then taking that person's word for what it's worth and respecting and following through. Because, yeah, everyone's going to have a different preference on what they find appropriate.
So, and I don't know if anybody watches Family Guy, not really kid appropriate, but I do watch Family Guy. And I just saw this episode not that long ago where Stan and his wife were going through some troubles, and his wife, Fran, was like, you never do anything to surprise me anymore. So Stan took it as, well, I'm going to do all these jump scares. He thought it was the funniest thing in the world. Well, then Fran decided to do it on him, and then she consistently did it over and over, and then he was freaked out. He didn't like being scared, but he was doing it to her. I don't know why I brought that into this episode, but that it just made me think of that. So if your partner is telling you respectfully, don't do that, and you don't take it for face value, you take it to heart, understand that they don't like that. I know Shannon is not a sarcastic person. If I continue to use sarcasm over and over and over and over, it's gonna condition Shannon to not be able to trust what I say. And I don't want her to ever not trust what I say.
Yeah, and that comes down to knowing who you are. So I only know that about myself because I've lived a different way in my past, and I know that that's the path that leads me down. It's a toxic pattern. When someone is excessively sarcastic with me over and over, that person loses their credibility with me. So that is my personal understanding of how I function. Other people might really appreciate sarcasm in their relationships, and it works for them. But again, knowing who you are and being able to communicate that to your partner, and then allowing your partner to step up with that respectful understanding is key.
Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome. Hey, Brian, what else stands out to you as far as what we can share with our listeners that we're doing differently in this new way of living?
So we make sure to set time aside to continue to date each other. 2 weekends ago, we decided to get a VRBO for kind of a pre-Valentine's Day gift to ourselves. And that, you hear it from everybody. Don't lose yourself in the kids and the day-to-day stuff. Continue to date each other. And one thing in my men's group that is always brought up is when they have date night with their wives. And that is truly, 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 truly an important piece of marriage. It's God first, your spouse second, kids third. The kids are right below spouse, but you can't lose focus of your spouse because the kids are going to grow, they're going to move on, they're going to get married, and who are you left with? Someone that you don't know for the last 20 years or someone that you continue to choose to grow with for 20 years?
Yeah, like a best friend.
And it is a conscious decision that you have to make. It is work to be able to do that. You can't approach it in a lackadaisical way and say, oh, well, we missed this weekend. We have, ultimate weekends from here to, until the kids move out to be able to, please don't approach it like that. So anybody that has kids that are listening right now, please make it a priority to take your spouse on a date. And I'm talking to both men and women on this. Please make it a priority to make your spouse a priority. That is important.
I love that because pursuing each other is one way you can show that you're prioritizing each other. Another thing think about as a couple, how are you two pursuing Jesus? Because you want your spouse or your significant other to pursue you and to date you, but you guys have to actively be essentially building that friendship and that relationship with Jesus too. He's waiting for you too. So as a couple, what can you do right in your own home, maybe when the kids are taking a nap or after they go down to bed? What advice would you give them, Brian?
I think the most important thing is spend time in the Word together, pray together. There have been studies done that the rate of divorce for people who have been married twice is north of 70%. But the staggering statistic is less than 1% of couples that pray together end up in divorce. So we make that a priority. We have that time to be able to have these deep conversations, spend time in the Word, read together, or just talk, whatever the case is. But for those couples out there with young children or soon to have babies, it's going to be very tough. But I implore you to make sure you make time for your spouse. Even though it may seem minimal, 5-10 minutes a day, do it. It's well worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. One other thing that like Brian and I do that I would recommend to our listeners is you can use the YouVersion Bible app. There are so many different functions in that app, including a way to start devotionals together. And so on each of your phones, you have the devotional. It cues you to do it every day. And then you go through and you read what they wrote, the author, and then you read the scripture that goes along with it, which is short little verses. And then at the end, you get to write and reflect. And so your partner or your significant other or your friend, whoever you're doing it with, can read your response. You guys can have a conversation about it. So sometimes like you and I can do that during our workday, during our break or something, and we're connecting during the day on that, spending time with God, growing in Him, and our wisdom about how we're walking this new life together.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. I referenced Colossians 3, verse 12. Since God chose you to be the holy people He loves, you must clothe yourselves with tenderhearted mercy, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Make allowance for each other's faults and forgive anyone who offends you. Remember, the Lord forgave you, so you must forgive others. Above all, clothe yourselves with love, which binds us all together in perfect harmony, and let the peace that comes from Christ rule in your hearts.
I like that. So that was Colossians 3:12 through 14. Great choice, Brian. That really does summarize what we've been trying to talk about and how we're carrying ourselves in the present with each other and how we hope to continue our marriage and our blending family in the future. Brian and I are holding tight to hope for the future that God is continuing to write our story. All too often in our past, and maybe you can relate, but we often take the pen out of our author's hand. We try to write the story ourselves. We try to make these choices that go against His will. How can God bless something that goes against His will? To know our shepherd's voice and His intentions for us means we have to be living in His word. Scripture is living and breathing, and it is so relevant to today. Allow it to work in your heart. Allow it to work in your mind. Allow it to unfold in your life, to expose things you've never seen before. You can have a relationship with God that is bigger than you've ever imagined. So for the future, allowing Him to write your story, that is the most fulfilling thing. Brian and I are going to have to really hold tight to that promise. With the unknowns ahead of us as we blend our family, try to merge households, this is a big step. We trust in Him, and we trust that He's going to put the right people in our lives to support us and to give us encouragement, to pray for us and to pray with us. And I hope all of you find the right circle of people who can pray for you and pray with you as well. Know that Brian and I are praying for each of you listening. We all need that as we walk forward day by day into this future. It is unknown, but it is not unknown to God.
Thank you for sharing that, Shannon.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in today to episode 6, part 2 of Living the New Life. What's going to happen next time? Brian, do you want to give us a preview?
Moving on to episode number 7. Everything up to this point has been kind of PG, maybe PG-10. Shannon's eyes got really wide.
What are we going to talk
What
about?
are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about the different levels of intimacy. And yes, that includes sex.
You can find us on different platforms currently at the time of recording. We've got Podbean, YouTube. You can also follow us on Instagram and on Facebook.
We out.
God's blessings.